Big game of the week is the Bills hosting the Chiefs. These teams we have seen a number of times. This will be meeting number 10 between Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. So dive into this one. Should be a whole lot of fun. But when you're looking at this one, Rank, we're going trick or treat on this one. Who's a trick, who's a treat potentially from this game?
You know, as the biggest Josh Allen fan on this show, I'm actually going to go the other way. I want to talk about Patrick Mahomes being an absolute treat. It's a treat much like a Reese's peanut butter cup because my son does not like them. But my son's 7. He's got no palate. He's a child. I wouldn't expect him to enjoy the finer things in life like a Reese's peanut butter cup. And instead, it works out well in my favor because it means that I get all the Reese's peanut butter cups. Similarly, when all of you hipsters were out there picking other quarterbacks in your fantasy drafts and turning your nose up to Patrick Mahomes, I was able to scoop him up in a lot of different spots, and now he has gone back to being, if not one of the top quarterbacks in fantasy football, reliable. I know it's annoying that he spreads the ball around. Guess what? It doesn't matter when he's your quarterback. So I've really loved this resurgence from Patrick Mahomes this season.
Yeah, shout out to the second best quarterback in this game. I think Travis Kelce is a trick this week. I almost wrote him up as a sit and start him, sit him. It's more of a beware, but the Bills have allowed the second fewest fantasy points and yards to tight ends this season. Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard, both of their starting lineups are expected back this week. Linebackers, And Kelce last year played the Bills twice. In those 2 games, he combined for just 27 yards. So as the great Mouse Rat once warned, in Buffalo, he might fall in the pit.
Wow, you got a Mouse Rat reference in. I was not expecting that. All right, moving on to the Colts and the Steelers. Rank, what are you looking at for that one?
I'm going to go with Jonathan Taylor, who continues to be an amazing option. It's kind of like a Snickers bar, an absolute treat, where a lot of people take Snickers bars for granted. It is, I think that most people, if you're like, hey, what are the top 5 candy bars? You would sit there and be like, Snickers obviously would crack the top 5, but it's not always one that people talk about a lot. Similarly, coming into the season, nobody was really hyping Jonathan Taylor. He was a guy that you were drafting at the end of the first round, early second round. Nobody really thought like this was going to be a league winner, which has absolutely been the case so far this season, averaging close to 6 yards per carry. Now he's got a great matchup this week against the Pittsburgh Steelers, a team that has been very vulnerable to the run, and a team that I would say the Steelers are a little bit reeling. The Indianapolis Colts, the surprise of the NFL season. So Jonathan Taylor, he satisfies.
All right, I'm going to go with DK Metcalf, and I think he's a treat this week. But it's been sort of those things where it's like a Three Musketeers bar, where it sits in the bag for what you look at it for a while, and you're like, what the heck is nougat? And then you actually try it, and you're like, oh, you know what? Actually, this isn't so bad. It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. And that's kind of what DK Metcalf has been, right? It doesn't necessarily look great, but the fact that he's scoring a lot of touchdowns has helped. A touchdown in 5 of Pittsburgh's 7 games. And the matchup is pretty good because the Colts have been very friendly to wide receivers this year, especially guys running routes in the middle of the field, which is where DK Metcalf tends to do all of his work. Next up, we got the Falcons and the Patriots. And I'm going to be selfish and start this one off and say, Travion Henderson is going to be a treat. Ooh. You know, it's like those strawberry candies that your grandmother has in that bowl. No, like the one I don't know
like the hard candies.
The hard candies with the strawberry wrapper on them. They're like that. Like you don't immediately go for them. Sort of like Mike Vrabel hasn't immediately gone for Travion Henderson, but this week he doesn't really have a choice, right? We know Antonio Gibson's on IR. Ramondre Stevenson not going to play because he's got a toe injury. So they have to go to Travion, right? They just have to.
Yeah.
There's no
Patriots, though.
Something could happen here. But it's a good matchup, especially when it comes to pass catching back. So we'll see if Drake May is able to get him involved in the passing game. But I just think, if nothing else, volume alone is going to win the day for Henderson this week.
The amount of messages I got about Ramondre Stevenson being out this week was wild. I think Drake May is a treat this week. Look, he had a tough matchup against the Browns last week, threw for 3 touchdowns, finished as the QB2 on the week. He's averaged 22.5 fantasy points per game since week 2, with only 1 game fewer than 19 fantasy points in that span. He is the statistically best deep ball thrower in the NFL this season. He is just matchup proof. I don't care that the Falcons are one of the toughest matchups matchups for quarterbacks. He is 5,000 candles in the wind. You start him this week.
Right. Let's move on to a big one in the NFC North. It is the Vikings and the Lions in Detroit. And Rank, what do you like or not like about this one?
Justin Jefferson, like Cobra Kai, never dies. And I'm going to say he's a treat, much like the purple bag of Skittles. Listen, Skittles, great candy. And a lot of times when you try to have some sort of variation, you're like, what are you guys doing? I don't like the spin-off. Nope, the purple one, just as good as the other one. Like, I guess Jamar Chase would be regular Skittles. Justin Jefferson would be the purple brand. But I actually prefer the purple brand. I think he is one of the most, if he's not the best receiver in the game, I don't know who is. Because I really do think, all things being equal, he is the best. He has done it with a wide variety of quarterbacks. I know that it worked out better last year when Sam Darnold was there, but this season, still working out. And even if J.J. McCarthy is the starting quarterback, I'm still fine with it. The Lions have allowed the most fantasy points per game to wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. They've allowed 7 receiving touchdowns to receivers out wide. Huge opportunity for Justin Jefferson in what I anticipate being the highest scoring match of the weekend.
I love sour Skittles until they completely char off all of your taste buds. I also like Jared Goff this week against the Vikings. In his last 5 games against them, he has averaged 18 fantasy points per game. But what I really like, and shout out to Kendall for this stat, he leads the NFL in pass rating against the blitz, and the Vikings blitz at the 2nd highest rate in the NFL. They've also allowed the 4th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks in the last month. So just like a Milky Way, Jared Goff is highly, highly underrated.
All right, there we go. We got plenty more game previews to continue after the break. We got some fantastic fantasy quarterbacks, but which one of these young stars are primed to be fabulous in Week 9? Find out when we return. RJ Harvey rocking the Orange Crush jerseys this past week had a fantastic game. And this week, the Broncos take on the Houston Texans. And for as great as last week was, I unfortunately have to say that RJ Harvey this week might be a trick. But it's not. Look, it's not about you, RJ. It's about your coach. It's about Sean Payton, right? RJ Harvey is like that little miniature box of nerds that you get, and you eat it, you just down it in one gulp pretty much. These were great. And you dig around the bag, and there's no more. And that's kind of what Sean Payton is doing. He's just hoarding RJ Harvey, which has not quite been there. The matchup is not particularly a great one either because the Texans have been tough against running backs. Did a pretty good job on Christian McCaffrey most of the week last week as well. So I like RJ Harvey. It's just that Sean Payton doesn't seem to like him as much as the rest of us do.
No, and I think in this one, both of the quarterbacks are tricks. Look, Bo Nix against the Texans, who've allowed the fewest fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. No QB has finished top 12 against them or scored 20 fantasy points. And then the Broncos on the other side, they've allowed the 3rd fewest fantasy points per game to quarterbacks, and they generate pressure and sacks at by far the highest rate in the NFL. It is not close, and we know that can cause fits for CJ Stroud. So these matchups, they are as bad as peanut butter cups, and you should stay far, far away this weekend.
There's a lot of cognitive dissonance in what you just said there about peanut butter cups being bad. I don't.
You cannot like them, but they're not bad.
That does not compare.
They're objectively not bad. You can say I don't like them. Kind of like you can say like I don't like Bo Nix. You're wrong. He's good, but
I just don't like him this week.
Bears Bengals up next. What is peanut butter cup good in this game?
I'm going to say Roma Dunze.
Yeah.
Roma Dunze is a treat. Much like this house back in Schaumburg we used to go to. They used to give out Portillo's cake shakes every night. I'm joking. That'd be an insane.
Sounds expensive.
Hey, that'd be a real expensive trick-or-treating. It's a lot like M&M's. Like M&M's in and of themselves, great. But it could be a little bit better by when you add a peanut into it. And this is I'm saying that the floor of Roma Dunze is plain M&M's. The upside is peanut M&M's because I think it could be really good. Because this Bears offense, we've seen before, the last time they lost this season, they bounced back after that game against Detroit, had a monster performance against the Dallas Cowboys. Now I anticipate them doing something very similar this week. This is one of the things that they brought in Ben Johnson for, was how they respond to the difficulty, and I expect a huge game out of Roma Dunze.
Yeah, and on the other side, I like Chase Brown in this one. He has looked more like himself again as of late, getting better fantasy results. And what I really like, the Bears have allowed the 4th most yards before contact to running backs, and him having room to run has been the big issue, holding Chase Brown back. They've also allowed explosive carries at the 6th highest rate in the NFL. And I kid you not, I wrote this down before the show. Flacco takes Chase Brown, who was kind of like a regular M&M, and he turns him into a caramel M&M, which to me are clearly the best ones.
There's peanut butter M&Ms, but they're not as good as Reese's Pieces because the peanut butter is just like a slightly lower quality.
You flew too close to the sun with the peanut butter. Like you didn't need
Try
to
the
do
caramel ones.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, next up, the 49ers heading to the Big Apple to take on the New York Football Giants. And I like Kendrick Bourne as kind of a treat this week, right? He's got like a little fun-sized Snickers. You know, maybe not going to be a big performance, but it'll be good enough to kind of satisfy you for this week in fantasy. Not sure yet who's going to be the quarterback for San Francisco. Brock Purdy has a chance to play, but it could still end up being Mac Jones, which actually would help Kendrick Bourne because the two of them have worked very well together. Bourne leads the Niners wide receivers in all major receiving categories, has a nearly 10-yard average depth of target, and the Giants, the sixth most favorable fantasy matchup for wide receivers this year. So Kendrick Bourne had two really big weeks, then a couple of down weeks. I think he gets back on the good side this week.
On the other side of the ball, I'm going to go with Jackson Dart as a treat. The East Coast has given us a lot of great things, culinary-wise. New York-style pizza, sheets, and, of course, my favorite, Twizzlers. Yep, this is the one time in my life when there is a West Coast, East Coast war where I will actually take the East Coast side of this with the Twizzler. It is my favorite. No disrespect to Red Vines and Red Vines connoisseurs out there. I prefer Twizzlers, and I know when they come in those little fun packs, it's great. Now, it would be a lot better if Cam Scatterbo was still out there, but they did get Darius Slayton back this week, which should help them out in stretching the field. I think they could be a fun little matchup this week against a 49ers team without Fred Warner. Some injuries all over the field. I think this could be really good.
Yeah, that Niner front obviously is just incredibly beat up. They've made a couple of additions to try and shore things up. But that's a perfect lead-in to our own Next Gen Ken and giving us a Next Gen Nugget. And Sir Harry Potter reporting over there from Hogwarts, apparently, on the other side of the studio. You have a little bit more on what to expect from this Giants-Niners matchup.
Yeah, I do. The boy who lived has come to give fantasy advice today. I like Wan'Dale Robinson this week against the 49ers. It's a great matchup. And I know it didn't really work out for me last time I recommended Wan'Dale, but as Michael Scott would say, I'm ready to be hurt again. The 49ers, they've really struggled defending wide receivers in the slot this season, and Robinson has run the second most routes from the slot behind only Ladd McConkey. The 49ers are last in catch rate over expectation, EPA per target, and fantasy points per game allowed to wide receivers in the slot. In addition to the alignment upgrade, the 49ers use single high coverage at the 12th highest rate, and Robinson has averaged the 6th most yards per target among wide receivers facing single high coverage this season. So, as Dart's premier pass catcher, Robinson has had 8 more targets than any other Giant since his first start, and he's posted 15-plus fantasy points in 2 of the last 3 games that he's played. So with that preferred option in the Giants' pass-catching room and the upgrade given his alignment, I think he's got to be in lineups this week.
All right, well, there we go. From Harry Potter and the wide receiver who gets... Time for IYKYK, which means if you know, you know. We will kick it off in Jacksonville with some tough news. Fantasy owners dealt a bad surprise. Travis Hunter placed on injured reserve this morning after suffering a non-contact knee injury at practice on Thursday. Star rookie had just come on strong last week, putting up over 24 points in NFL.com's standard scoring leagues. Some better news, the Washington Commanders getting their starting quarterback back. On Friday, the team announced that Jaden Daniels, who's been dealing with a hamstring injury, will return for this Sunday's matchup against the Seattle Seahawks. Daniels last played on October 19th against the Dallas Cowboys. That gets us to that matchup between the Seattle Seahawks and the Washington Commanders. And I'm going to say this is kind of maybe a deep pull for a treat. It's going to be A.J. Barner. Look, this is sort of a Tootsie Roll, right? It's kind of an acquired taste. Not everybody's going to be into it, but for people who like it, I think you kind of roll with it. He's third on the team in receiving yards, tied for the team lead in receiving touchdowns, was really starting to pick things up in weeks 5 and 6, had a combined 10 catches for 124 yards and a pair of touchdowns on 10 targets. And it's a good matchup. 4 different tight ends have had a top 5 weeks so far against the Commanders this year.
Yeah, and I like his signal caller in this one. Sam Darnold has top 20 fantasy points in 2 straight prior to that game against the Texans, which are such a tough matchup. The Commanders, though, they've allowed the 4th most pass yards and touchdowns and the 5th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. Jaden's back, so it could be a higher scoring game. Darnold is a lot like a Hershey bar, right? Like, he's not the first thing you pick when you're looking through the bag of candy, but he gets the job done.
Hershey bars are underrated. Anyway, it's time now for Seize the Season presented by Caesar Sportsbook. According to Caesar Sportsbook, here are the most likely players to score the first touchdown during this week's Sunday night matchup between the Seahawks and the Commanders. Very little surprise, Jackson Smith and Jigba on top of the list, followed by Zach Charbonnet, Kenneth Walker, who seems to have to break one from about 20 yards out to score a touchdown, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who has cooled off in recent weeks, and then Zach Ertz. So, Florio, you going to go someone on the board, or you going to go off menu here?
I'm going with JSN here. And look, I was shocked that week 3 against the Saints was the only time all year he's been the first touchdown scorer. But the Commanders have allowed the 4th most yards on deep passes this year. We know JSN can stretch the field. I think he gets loose, and the Seahawks hit a very quick home run. In fact, you could call Darnold and JSN the new Schneider and Vlad Jr., as Marcus and the entire control room hate me right now.
New users can bet $1 to boost their next 20 bets by 100%. Must be 21 or older. See Caesars.com/promos for full terms. There are a handful of big names floating around as potential trade candidates as the deadline grows near. But how do you go about making some monster moves in your league? Stick around. I'm going to creep it real and give you some of the tricks of the trade when we come back.
Herbert to throw, looking left, now middle, and caught, touchdown, Chargers. Oronde Gadsden got his first touchdown last week. Does not take long to get his second. If you thought it was a fluke, think again.
Heck of a drive for this offense, and punctuated by the growing chemistry between Herbert and Gadsden.
Yes, indeed. Those were the voices of our friends Matt Money Smith and Daniel Jeremiah on the call for the L.A. Chargers, a team that has a great history at the tight end position going back to Kellen Winslow, Antonio Gates, Michael F. Florio. Is there another possible tight end who could be following in those footsteps?
Yeah, I think Oronde Gadsden II is a treat this week. He's averaged 20 fantasy points per game in the last 3 weeks. I haven't seen someone become a star this quickly since Johnny Karate, but in that span, he is tied for the team lead in targets against zone. And what I really love, he is almost double the amount of yards than any other Charger against that coverage, and the Titans play zone nearly 80% of the time. So get him in your lineups.
Oronde Gadsden II is an NFL legacy. Surprisingly enough, Ladd McConkey is not. For those of us old enough to remember Phil McConkey, this is not. And you sit there and you watch Ladd McConkey in those yellow uniforms, you think of Butterfingers, but instead, he is one of the most reliable receivers in all of the NFL. He's had at least 7+ targets in 4 consecutive games, and now he's got a great matchup against the Tennessee Titans, who have allowed the 2nd most yards per target to wide receivers this season and the 9th most fantasy points to the wideouts this year. All right, let's stick with the other LA team. The Los Angeles Rams are traveling to New Orleans. Actually, no, hold on. The Saints are coming here to play the LA Rams, and I'm going to tee us off right here talking about Puka Nacua, who has been one of the most reliable players in all of football over the last couple of years. He's a treat. He's an absolute treat, like a Mr. Goodbar coming in here, rolling for the Rams. You know what? He has missed a lot of time, and yet is still one of the leading receivers in the NFL. He's had at least 22 fantasy points in each of his last 5 full games. An absolute treat, but on the other side, Michael, is there somebody who could be a trick?
Yeah, I think Alvin Kamara is a trick this week. He's posted a career low in many metrics, including yards per touch and yards per game. In the last 6 weeks, he has been a top 25 fantasy running back just 1 time. And then it is a tough matchup. The Rams have allowed the 2nd fewest fantasy points to running backs and only 1 touchdown rushing or receiving combined to running backs this season. So this week, Alvin Kamara, he could have network connectivity problems.
Yeah, and if he ends up getting dealt on the over the trade deadline, Devin Neal is somebody who could step up at some point. But I want to ask you this question, because earlier in the show, I talked about the dilemma that I had with Lamar Jackson and Jordan Love. I went with Lamar Jackson. He was obviously great, but What about Jordan Love? What do we think about him this week playing against the Carolina Panthers?
Yeah, last week I said on this show to sit Jordan Love, and he absolutely went off. But I'm going to double down this week and say he is a trick because he has scored fewer than 16 fantasy points in 4 of 7 games. And the Panthers are a tougher matchup than I think people realize. They've allowed fewer than 200 passing yards per game this season. They got ran all over last week, and Green Bay runs the ball at the 4th highest rate. They're very run heavy in the red zone. I think Jordan Love in this one is like candy corn. You think it's going to be awesome, and then you buy the whole bag, and a few minutes in, you're like, maybe this wasn't the best idea.
You know, I found just from my own sample size of my son, who doesn't like Reese's peanut butter cups, actually likes candy corn. And I think there's some correlation there, or maybe it's causation. We don't know. You know what? It's interesting you say that about Jordan Love, because I do feel like Romeo Doubs could be a treat this week, kind of like that whatchamacallit bar back in the day. Back in the 80s, they introduced the whatchamacallit. Some ad executive were like, this would be so funny to name a candy bar called the whatchamacallit. I don't even know if they still make them, and they shouldn't. No. But the one thing about the Packers wide receivers, it's a variety pack. Like, you reach into a bag, you really don't know who is going to get the end zone opportunities. But one of the things I like about Jordan Love, what I like about Romeo Doubs, is he leads Green Bay with 42 targets this season, leads the team in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. So if there is one guy that you're going to try to rely on, I know it is a very hard thing and very difficult to determine week in and week out, but Romeo Doubs is my guy. Now, earlier today, we talked about some of the breaking news about Travis Hunter, a player who on Thursday's show, I said he is going to go out there and score 3 touchdowns. Spoiler alert, probably not going to happen. Not going to happen from the IR, but we are getting a guy back into our lineups this week, and he's going to be on the other side of the football. I'm talking about Brock Bowers. Yes, Brock Bowers is going to return for the Las Vegas Raiders. This is an absolute treat. It's like the chocolate-covered oranges that you get from Trader Joe's. I discovered one in the freezer this week. Like, oh my God, I forgot we had these here, and it was amazing. That's what it feels like. Sliding Brock Bowers into the lineup is like, oh good, I don't need to stream a quarter. I don't need to make sure that Will Dissly is available or whomever. I can go out there and start Brock Bowers against the Jags, who allowed the 9th most yards per targets this season, which I think is going to be very helpful. What about you, Michael? Who do you see? Give me a treat from this team or from this game.
I spent the last 40 years undercover, never seen my own family, never recommended Trevor Lawrence until now. He's averaged 21 fantasy points per game in the last 3 outings, and he gets the Raiders, who, for one, they generate pressure at the 3rd lowest rate in the NFL, so I think that'll give Trevor Lawrence time to throw. They've also really struggled mightily against wide receivers, especially out wide. I had written that Lawrence has 2 good ones, but now he has 1 good out wide receiver in Brian Thomas Jr. I think he'll be able to get him the ball. I think Lawrence is a little bit sneaky this week in a favorable matchup.
Yeah, and don't be that person this week, too, that's like, hey, Travis Hunter's out. I'm going to try to trade him now to one of my opponents. There is a decent way to do trades in fantasy football. And here to speak on that is our own Marcus Grant with A Minute with Marcus.
Thank you, Adam. You know, what kind of stores and places that people enjoy shopping? Ones where they feel like they're getting scammed. I mean, who doesn't love paying $20 for a mediocre burger, overcooked fries, and a drink with too much ice? Everyone loves that. That's what you sound like when you send some of your trade offers. You want James Cook? Okay, what are you offering me? Juju Smith-Schuster, Hassan Haskins, and half a bag of Sour Patch Kids? Trades are supposed to help both teams. It is a maneuver to win games, not a game to be won. You're not supposed to be scamming the other person. Unless that person is a family member, in which case all bets are off. It'll make Thanksgiving a lot more interesting. So before you hit send on that trade offer, ask yourself one question. Would I rage throw my phone into a river if this were sent back to me? If the answer is no, then feel free to send away. Oh, and if you're done with those Sour Patch Kids, I'll take them. This has been A Minute with Marcus. Adam?
Ja'Cory Klosky, Merritt, and Jackson Smith and Jigba have been beautiful surprises this season. But is their continued success just wishful thinking? We're taking it to the Rankenstein to answer those questions and more when NFL Fantasy Live returns.
Own Fantasy Zen Master, Michael F. Loyal, please bring us a little bit of Zen, different kind of spirits this week. Some guys maybe who rise from the grave and help out some fantasy managers, huh?
Yeah, it's spooky season, man, so we need to get some zombies going this week. And look, it's been a bummer year for Brian Thomas Jr., and I blame the man and not the fact that, well, he leads the league in drops right now, and he's limited at practice this week, but it looks like he's going to play in this far out matchup, man. As the Raiders, they've allowed the 4th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. They struggle against them out wide. They play zone at the 3rd highest rate. All of that is groovy for Brian Thomas Jr. and his running mate, unfortunately, is out, which is just a total drag, man. But it could mean more targets for Thomas. And you could just tell by the way his coach says Duval that he'd be down with some hippies. So go with the flow and play BTJ this week. Plus, we go from one struggling junior to another in Marvin Harrison Jr. And I had high hopes for Marv this year, and I have not been this let down since I showed up a day late for the Grateful Dead concert. But he has an out-of-sight matchup this week against the Cowboys, who've allowed by far the most touchdowns and fantasy points per game to wide receivers. They really struggle against wide receivers, so he could totally bounce back. Dig it. And right now, I might need my friends Shaggy and Scooby to figure out who's going to be throwing him the ball, man. But regardless, take it to the rank, because I think just like BTJ, you go with the flow and you play MHJ this week.
Marcus, I'm sorry. I've had enough of this hippie crap. Get that off here. Hey, this is fantasy football. You can't just sit here and go with the flow. You got to land a punch. You got to go out there and demand that your team goes out there and plays well. I've had enough of this. I want to go out there and have the Cardinals take it to them. Strike first, strike hard, no mercy. Don't listen to this. Go Kaiway.
I'm just not really feeling this whole vibe, this aura.
Back
right
in
now,
my day,
man.
the hippies would get run over.
We got the calm, then we got the aggressive and violent. I think we just need to bring it somewhere in the middle, man. I mean, Marvin Harrison, his dad played in the NFL. He was great. He's just trying to live up to that sort of thing, man. And I think you got to get the opportunity this week against the Dallas Cowboys. I like having him in the lineup. I think we just got to get the vibes right, man. We just got to get the vibes right for this week.
Marcus, you want to hit a Grateful Dead concert after this? I think we'd get along great.
No, I think I don't know if there's the Outcast reunion. I like that.
What are you talking about? Grateful Dead,
3000.
Pantera's playing this week. We got to go listen to some rock. We're gonna go see Journey. We're gonna go see Quiet Riot. Maybe that was a better.
The Andre 3000 flute album, man. You got to check that out.